You've seen it happen. A woman talks about the kind of man she wants. She lists qualities, kindness, patience, someone who listens. Then she meets that man, and nothing happens. Her eyes stay flat. Her energy stays low. She smiles politely and finds reasons to leave early. But then another man walks in. He doesn't do what she said she wanted. He doesn't chase her words. He doesn't try to prove he fits the list. And she leans in. Her voice changes. Her body shifts. She stays longer than she planned. You've watched this pattern repeat. You've probably lived it. And it confuses you because her behavior doesn't match her words. This isn't about lies. Women aren't deliberately misleading you. This is about something deeper. Something they feel, but can't always name. Carl Jung spent years studying the parts of ourselves we hide. He called it the shadow, the parts we don't want to admit we carry. Every person has desires they can't speak out loud, not because they're ashamed, but because saying them breaks the image they want to project. Women live in this tension constantly. Society tells them to want safety. Biology whispers something different. The conscious mind says one thing. The body responds to another. And most men never learn to read the difference. So they listen to the words and ignore the signals. They become what she says she wants, then wonder why attraction dies. Here's what changes everything. Desire doesn't live in logic. It lives in feeling. When a woman describes her ideal partner, she's describing what sounds right, what feels socially acceptable, what won't make her look shallow or broken. But desire doesn't care about acceptable. It responds to patterns she can't fully control. Think about fear for a second. You know spiders are mostly harmless. Your logical brain understands this. But when you see one crawl across your wall, your body reacts anyway. That's not stupidity. That's biology. Attraction works the same way. She knows the kind man is safer. She knows he'll treat her well. She knows he fits the checklist. But her body doesn't respond to checklists. It responds to tension, to presence, to the feeling that this person carries something powerful under the surface. Pause. This is where most advice gets it wrong. People tell you to be nicer, more available, more expressive. They say modern women want emotional openness and vulnerability, and they do, but not first. First, they need to feel something that can't be explained in words. A pull, a charge, a sense that you move through the world differently than others. Robert Greene studied power for decades. He noticed something strange about historical figures who commanded loyalty. They didn't beg for it. They didn't explain why people should follow them. They simply moved with certainty, and others felt that certainty like gravity. Women respond to the same force, not because they want to be controlled, but because they want to feel that someone understands how to hold their ground when everything around them shakes. Most men collapse under emotional pressure. A woman tests the temperature, and the man overreacts. He explains too much. He chases her approval. He tries to fix her mood immediately, and she loses respect, not because he cared, but because he couldn't stay calm while caring. Here's the truth people avoid saying. Women are attracted to the man who feels dangerous but acts disciplined. Not dangerous like violent, dangerous like capable. Like he could handle conflict, but chooses not to start it. Like he carries fire but doesn't let it burn everything around him. This creates the tension that attraction needs to survive. Safety alone feels boring. Danger alone feels unstable. But danger that protects? That's the combination biology has been searching for since the beginning. Think about that. She won't tell you she's testing you, but she is. Every woman you meet is running invisible experiments, not to hurt you, not to play games, to see if you're real, because she's been lied to before. She's met men who performed confidence but collapsed the moment things got hard. So she pushes. She pulls away to see if you chase. She argues to see if you crack. She goes quiet to see if you panic. And most men fail every single test without knowing there was one. Here's why. They think the test is about winning her approval. So they react emotionally. They defend themselves. They try to prove they're good enough. But that's not what she's measuring. She's measuring your center. Can you stay calm when she's not? Can you hold your frame when hers is shaking? Can you lead yourself even when she's pulling you off course? Nietzsche wrote about the will to power, not power over others, power over yourself. The ability to decide who you are and not let circumstances rewrite you. That's what she's testing for. She doesn't need you to be perfect. She needs to know you won't dissolve under pressure. Because if you can't handle her small tests, you definitely can't handle real life. Let me show you what this looks like. You're talking. Things are going well. Then suddenly she says something sharp, something that feels like a small attack. Most men do one of two things. They either snap back and start a fight, or they apologize immediately and try to smooth it over. Both responses fail. The first shows you're reactive. The second shows you're weak. What works? Pause, breathe, then respond without emotion. Not coldly, just calmly. You acknowledge what she said. You don't take the bait. You stay exactly who you were before she tested the temperature. And something shifts. She relaxes. Because she just learned you don't break easily. That's not manipulation. That's communication beneath words. She's asking a question with behavior. You answer with presence. Here's another pattern. She cancels plans last minute. No good reason. Just says she's tired or busy. The average man either gets angry or gets needy. He tells her how disappointed he is. Or he immediately offers another time and asks what works better for her. Both reveal the same thing. His emotional state depends on her. But the man who understands this pattern does something different. He says something simple. No problem. Let me know when you're free. Then he moves on with his night. No guilt trip. No eagerness. Just calm acceptance. And watch what happens. She often reaches out again sooner than expected. Because she just tested whether you need her. And you showed you don't. That's attractive. Not because cruelty is attractive, but because independence is. Schopenhauer talked about desire as a cycle of wanting and emptying. The moment you get what you want, the wanting stops. The charge dies. Women understand this instinctively. If you're too available, there's nothing to want. If you're too desperate, the mystery disappears. But if you're genuinely busy living your life, if her presence is welcome but not required, that creates the space where desire can actually grow. Most men think they need to show how much they care by always being there. But being always available doesn't show love. It shows you have nothing else going on. And that's not attractive to anyone. Here's the shift. Stop trying to pass her tests. Start living in a way where tests don't shake you. When you build a life you're proud of, her approval becomes nice, but not necessary. When you have purpose that drives you, her attention becomes a bonus, not the goal. When you know your value, you stop defending it every time someone questions it. That's the foundation, not tricks, not tactics. Just a man who's so rooted in himself that external turbulence doesn't move him. And that rootedness is what she's been searching for the entire time. She wants to feel like you're a tree she can lean on without you bending. Not because you're harsh, but because you're solid. Freud said people are driven by two forces, the need for pleasure and the need to avoid pain. But he missed something. There's a third force, the need to feel safe with someone strong enough to handle the world. Women carry this need more intensely than men often realize. They live in a world that can be threatening, physically, socially, emotionally. So when they meet a man who stays calm under pressure, something ancient inside them relaxes. They feel protected. Not because you're controlling them, but because you're not controlled by chaos. That's the difference. Think about the last time you stayed calm when someone else panicked. How did they respond to you after? They trusted you more. They listened more carefully. They wanted to stay close. That's not coincidence. That's psychology. There's a moment that happens early. You're talking to someone new. The conversation is light, surface level, normal. Then she says something that reveals a crack, a vulnerability, a piece of herself she usually keeps hidden. and you have a choice. Most men jump on it. They try to fix it. They offer advice. They rush to fill the silence with comfort. They think they're being helpful. But what she feels is pressure. Because she didn't share that piece to get solutions. She shared it to see what you'd do with something fragile. Would you handle it carefully? Or would you rush to close the gap because discomfort makes you nervous? Sun Tzu wrote about knowing when to advance and when to hold position. The strongest generals weren't the ones who always attacked. They were the ones who recognized the moment. When a woman shows you something real, the power move isn't to fix it. It's to acknowledge it. Then let it breathe. You say something simple. That sounds heavy. Or, I get that. Then you pause. You don't fill the space. You let her sit with being seen without being judged or corrected. And that pause does something most men never understand. It builds trust faster than any amount of talking ever could. Because in that silence, she learns you're not afraid of depth. You're not rushing to make everything light again. You can hold weight without panicking. That's rare. Think about your own life. How many people can sit with you when things aren't okay, without trying to cheer you up or change the subject? Probably very few. That's the same thing she's measuring. Can you be present with discomfort? Or do you need everything to feel easy all the time? Here's where it gets interesting. Desire doesn't grow in comfort. It grows in the space between comfort and challenge. When everything is too easy, there's no charge. When everything is too hard, there's no safety. But when you create the feeling that you can handle both, that you're comfortable in tension, that's where attraction lives. Robert Greene called this the art of strategic absence. Not disappearing, not playing games. Just understanding that presence means more when it's not constant. When you're always there, your value flattens. When you show up intentionally, your presence carries weight. Most men fear this because they think absence means she'll forget about them. But the opposite is true. When you're not always available, she starts thinking about you more, not less. Because her brain has space to wonder, to imagine, to build a story about who you are when you're not around. And what she imagines is always more interesting than what you could tell her. Pause. This doesn't mean ignore people. It means live your life fully enough that you're not always waiting around. Big difference. A man with purpose naturally creates this dynamic, not as a tactic, as a side effect. He has things that matter to him. Projects, goals, time alone, friendships, growth. So when a woman enters his life, she fits into his world. She doesn't become his entire world. And she feels that difference immediately. Women can sense when they're your only source of meaning. And it makes them feel responsible for your happiness. That's exhausting. But when they sense you have a full life they're being invited into, that's exciting. Now they're choosing to be part of something, not carrying the weight of being everything. Here's something most people miss. Attraction isn't about making someone need you. It's about making someone want to be around the person you're becoming. You can't fake that. You can't trick someone into wanting you long term. But you can become the kind of person whose energy feels good to be near. And that starts with how you manage yourself. Do you spiral when things go wrong? Or do you adapt? Do you complain constantly? Or do you solve problems quietly? Do you blame the world? Or do you take responsibility for what you can control? These patterns show up in everything you do, and people feel them even when you're not talking. Machiavelli warned leaders about one thing more than anything else. Don't let others see you sweat. Not because you shouldn't feel pressure, but because the moment people see you losing control, they lose faith in your ability to lead. Women apply this same test in relationships. They watch how you handle stress, how you respond to bad news, how you move through conflict, and they make decisions based on what they see. If you stay grounded, they feel safe. If you panic, they start looking for the exit. It's not cruel. It's survival instinct. She needs to know that when life gets hard, you won't fall apart. Because life will get hard. And if you can't handle small problems now, you definitely can't handle big ones later. So she tests, not with words, with situations. She watches how you respond when plans change, when someone disrespects you, when things don't go your way, and your response tells her everything she needs to know. Here's the shift that changes everything. Stop seeing challenges as problems. Start seeing them as auditions. Every moment of friction is a chance to show who you really are. Not who you pretend to be when things are easy, but who you become when pressure rises. That version of you is the one she's trying to meet. And if you can introduce her to that person, everything else becomes simple. Because she stops testing. She starts trusting. And trust is where real connection begins. Let's talk about silence. Most people are terrified of it. They fill every gap with words, jokes, explanations, anything to avoid the discomfort of empty space. But silence is where power lives. When you speak constantly, your words lose value. When you choose silence strategically, every word you do say carries weight. Marcus Aurelius wrote about the strength of restraint. He said the disciplined mind knows when to act and when to observe. That's the difference between reaction and response. Reaction is automatic. Response is chosen. When someone says something that irritates you, reaction is snapping back immediately. Response is pausing, processing, then deciding if it's even worth addressing. That pause is everything. Because in that space, you take back control. You're no longer being moved by someone else's energy. You're deciding how to move yourself. And people feel that shift. When you don't react emotionally to every little thing, you become unpredictable in the best way. They can't manipulate you with mood. They can't bait you into arguments. They can't pull you off center. And that makes you magnetic, not because you're cold, but because you're calm. There's a huge difference. Cold means you don't care. Calm means you care, but you're not controlled by it. Women are drawn to calm because it signals emotional intelligence. It says you understand your feelings, but you're not enslaved by them. That's rare. Most people are reactive. They feel something and immediately express it without filter. But the person who can feel anger and choose not to lash out, who can feel attraction and choose not to chase desperately, that person has mastered themselves. And self-mastery is the most attractive quality that exists. Here's what this looks like in real situations. You're in a conversation. She says something designed to get a reaction. Maybe she mentions another guy. Maybe she criticizes something about you. The reactive man defends immediately, or gets jealous, or tries to prove her wrong. The calm man does something different. He smiles slightly, pauses, then either redirects the conversation or addresses it without emotion. No defensiveness, no neediness, just presence. And watch what happens. She either drops it completely or she pushes harder to see if you'll break. But either way, you've already won. Because you didn't give her your emotional control, you kept it. Jung talked about integration, the process of accepting all parts of yourself instead of suppressing them. Most men think control means hiding emotion, but real control means acknowledging emotion without being ruled by it. You feel jealousy, you notice it, you understand where it comes from. Then you decide it's not useful in this moment, so you let it pass. That's mastery, not pretending you don't feel, but choosing what to do with what you feel. And that choice is what separates boys from men. Boys react, men respond. Boys need validation, men generate their own certainty. Boys chase approval, men live by standards. Now here's the part most people miss. This isn't about being stoic all the time, it's about being intentional. There are moments to show emotion, moments to be vulnerable, moments to express what you feel. But those moments should be chosen, not forced out of you by someone else's manipulation. When you decide to open up, it means something. When you're pressured into it, it feels like weakness. The difference is agency. Do you control when and how you reveal yourself, or does someone else control that? Greene studied seduction for years. He found one pattern in every successful seducer throughout history. They never gave everything away at once. They revealed themselves slowly, layer by layer, so the other person always felt like there was more to discover. That's the power of restraint. When you talk constantly about yourself, there's no mystery left. When you share selectively, people stay curious. And curiosity keeps them coming back. Think about the people you're most interested in. Chances are, they're not the ones who overshare. They're the ones who say just enough to intrigue you, then stop talking. That restraint creates pull. You want to know more. You lean in. You start asking questions, and suddenly, they're controlling the pace of the connection without saying a word. That's strategic silence. Now let's get practical. Start practicing pauses in every conversation. When someone asks you a question, don't answer immediately. Take 2 seconds. Breathe. Then respond. That tiny delay changes everything. It shows you're thinking. It shows you're not desperate to fill space. It shows you're comfortable with silence. And people unconsciously respect that. They start listening more carefully to what you say, because they sense your words are measured. Next, practice not defending yourself automatically. When someone criticizes you, resist the urge to explain or justify. Just acknowledge it. Fair point. Or, I can see why you'd think that. Then move on. No need to prove them wrong. No need to win the argument. Just stay calm and let the moment pass. You'll notice something interesting. Most people respect you more after these moments, not less, because you didn't need their approval to feel okay about yourself. That confidence is contagious. Finally, practice walking away from conversations that don't serve you. Not every argument needs to be finished. Not every point needs to be made. Sometimes the strongest move is simply stepping back. When you do this, you protect your peace. And peace is more valuable than being right. Dostoevsky wrote about the man who could endure suffering without complaint. He called it quiet strength. That strength doesn't announce itself. It simply exists. And people feel it like warmth from a fire. They move toward it without knowing why. That's the power of silence and restraint. It's not about manipulation. It's about mastery. And mastery is what separates the people who command respect from the people who beg for it. Here's something nobody talks about. Women don't fall for who you are in the beginning. They fall for who you stay being when things get uncomfortable. Anyone can be charming on a first date. Anyone can be attentive when they're trying to impress someone. But what happens when the newness wears off? What happens when she's in a bad mood and takes it out on you? When she's stressed and becomes distant? When she stops putting in effort and waits to see what you'll do? That's when most men reveal who they really are. And usually it's not impressive. They either become needy, chasing her attention, or they become resentful, punishing her for the change. Both responses kill attraction instantly, because both show the same thing. You were performing the whole time. Your confidence wasn't real, it was borrowed, and the moment it wasn't returned with validation, it collapsed. But here's what the rare man does. He stays exactly the same, not because he's ignoring her, but because his emotional state doesn't depend on hers. He's still living his life, still pursuing his goals, still showing up as himself. Whether she's warm or cold, whether she's present or distant, his internal weather doesn't change based on her mood. And that consistency is what creates lasting attraction. Kahneman studied decision-making for decades. He found that people don't choose based on logic. They choose based on emotional patterns. And the pattern that builds trust is consistency. When someone is unpredictable, you can't relax around them. You're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. But when someone shows up the same way every time, even through difficulty, your nervous system learns to trust them. That's not boring, that's valuable. Think about the people in your life you truly respect. They're probably not the most exciting, but they're reliable. You know what you're getting, and that reliability makes them irreplaceable. Women value this even more than men do, because they've been conditioned to expect men to change, to lose interest, to stop trying once they feel secure. So when they meet a man who doesn't follow that pattern, it stands out. He doesn't love bomb her in the beginning, then disappear. He shows steady interest from day one. He doesn't promise the world, then fail to deliver. He makes small promises and keeps them. He doesn't perform intensity to win her over. He just shows up as himself, consistently. And that steadiness becomes addictive, because she stops worrying about when you'll change. She starts trusting that this is actually who you are. Pause. Here's where most advice gets it backwards. People tell you to create excitement, spontaneity, unpredictability. And sure, novelty has its place, but excitement fades. Unpredictability creates anxiety, and anxiety doesn't build long-term bonds. What builds bonds is knowing someone will still be there when the excitement settles, that they're not just around for the high moments. They're around for the boring Tuesday nights too. That's the foundation of real connection, not fireworks. Foundation. Let me show you what this looks like. You're 3 months into seeing someone. The early intensity has mellowed. She's not texting as much, not making as much effort. The insecure man panics. He starts texting more to compensate. He plans elaborate dates to reignite the spark. He asks what's wrong constantly. All of this pushes her further away, because it shows he needs the excitement to feel secure. And if he needs it, then it's not real connection. It's just addiction to the high. But the secure man does something different. He maintains his pace. He keeps showing up without forcing anything. He gives her space to come back to center on her own. He doesn't chase the feeling. He trusts the foundation, and usually she comes back. Not because of anything he did, but because his calm reminded her why she was attracted in the first place. He doesn't fall apart when things aren't perfect. That's the test most men don't even know they're taking. Greene wrote about this in the 1600s. He said the wise man guards his reputation by never revealing desperation, not because desperation is shameful, but because it signals that you don't trust yourself. And if you don't trust yourself, why should anyone else? Women are incredibly sensitive to this signal. They can feel when a man's confidence is conditional, when it only exists if she's giving him attention. And conditional confidence isn't confidence at all. It's performance. Real confidence stays steady regardless of external validation. That's what she's looking for. That's what keeps her interested long after the initial attraction fades. Here's the practical shift. Build a life that fulfills you independent of any relationship. Not as a tactic, as a necessity. Have hobbies that challenge you, friendships that energize you, goals that excite you, time alone that recharges you. When these things exist, you stop needing a relationship to feel complete. And ironically, that's when relationships start working better. Because you're bringing wholeness to the table, not emptiness looking to be filled. Women can sense the difference immediately. An empty man feels heavy. He needs constant reassurance, constant attention, constant proof that he's wanted. A whole man feels light. He enjoys connection but doesn't depend on it for his identity. That lightness is attractive because it removes pressure. She doesn't have to be everything for you. She just has to be herself. And that freedom is what allows real intimacy to grow. Now here's the deepest part. The monster women desire isn't a person who never feels doubt or fear or insecurity. It's a person who feels all of those things and doesn't let them control his actions. He feels doubt, but moves forward anyway. He feels fear, but doesn't run. He feels insecurity, but doesn't seek constant validation. That's emotional maturity. And emotional maturity is the rarest, most attractive quality in modern dating. Because most people are still children in adult bodies, reacting, blaming, avoiding. But the person who's done the work to understand themselves, who can regulate their own emotions without needing someone else to do it for them, that person is operating on a completely different level. And when a woman meets that level, she doesn't want to leave it, because she finally feels like she can relax. She doesn't have to manage your emotions and hers. She doesn't have to parent you through your insecurities. She can just exist, and let you exist, and build something real in that space. That's the goal. Not to impress her, not to win her over, but to become so solid in yourself that being around you feels like relief instead of work. And that solidity comes from consistency, from showing up the same way when things are easy and when they're hard. from being the kind of person who doesn't change based on how others treat you. That's the foundation of power. Not loud, not aggressive, just unshakable. There's a specific moment when attraction either deepens or dies. It happens when she realizes you see her, not the version she performs, not the mask she shows the world, but the actual person underneath. Most men never reach this moment. They're too busy trying to be seen themselves. They talk about their achievements, their plans, their opinions, their past, and she listens. But she's not impressed. Because she's heard this before. Every man she's met has tried to prove his value through talking, but the rare man does something different. He asks questions that matter. Then he listens to the answers like they contain secrets. Not because he's pretending to care, but because he's genuinely curious about how people think. And that curiosity creates depth that small talk never could. Cialdini studied influence for 30 years. He found that the most persuasive people aren't the best talkers. They're the best listeners, because when you truly listen to someone, they feel understood. And feeling understood creates loyalty faster than any clever words. Women spend most of their lives not being truly heard. People listen to respond, not to understand. They wait for their turn to talk, instead of absorbing what's being said. So when a man actually listens, it stands out immediately. He doesn't interrupt. He doesn't redirect the conversation to himself. He doesn't try to fix her problems unless she asks. He just holds space for her to be honest. And in that space, something rare happens. She stops performing. She stops trying to be impressive or agreeable or easy. She becomes real. And that's when attraction moves from surface level to something much deeper. Because now, she's not attracted to your image. She's attracted to how she feels when she's with you. Safe enough to be herself. Seen enough to be honest. Trusted enough to be vulnerable. That feeling is what keeps people coming back. Not your looks, not your status, not your charm. The feeling that they can finally stop pretending. Pause. Here's what this looks like in practice. She's telling you about her day. Most men half listen while thinking about what they want to say next. But you notice something in her tone, a slight shift, a hint of frustration she's not naming directly. And instead of ignoring it, you ask about it. You sound frustrated. What happened? It's a simple question, but it shows you're paying attention to more than just her words. You're reading her energy, her emotion, the subtext beneath the surface. And when she realizes you noticed, something shifts. She opens up more. She shares things she wasn't planning to. She trusts you with the parts of herself she usually hides. That trust is the foundation of everything. Without it, you're just two people performing for each other. With it, you're actually connecting. Now here's the part most men miss. Listening isn't passive. It's active. It means giving someone your full attention, not your distracted, phone-in-hand, half-present attention. Your actual focus, eye contact, body turned toward them, mind quiet instead of racing to the next thought. That level of presence is so rare that when people receive it, they remember you, not because you said something brilliant, but because you made them feel heard. And feeling heard is one of the deepest human needs that exists. Hobbes wrote about the state of nature. He said people are driven by the fear of being forgotten. That's why we talk so much, why we perform, why we constantly try to prove we matter. But when someone makes you feel like you matter without you having to prove it, that person becomes irreplaceable. Women experience this even more intensely, because society constantly tells them their value is conditional, based on appearance, agreeability, usefulness. So when a man shows up and values them just for being themselves, it breaks the pattern. She's not used to being seen without judgment, to being heard without interruption, to being valued without needing to perform. And that experience creates attraction that logic can't explain. She might not even understand why she feels drawn to you. She just knows being around you feels different, better, calmer, more real. That's the result of genuine presence. Here's how to develop it. Start by practicing silence in conversations. When someone finishes talking, Wait 3 seconds before responding. In those 3 seconds, actually think about what they said. Let it settle. Let yourself feel if there's something beneath their words. Then respond to that deeper thing, not just the surface. This creates conversations that feel meaningful instead of transactional. Next, ask follow-up questions that show you are listening. If she mentions something in passing, bring it up later. You said you were worried about that project. How did it turn out? That shows you retained what mattered to her, that you care enough to remember the details. Small things like this build massive trust over time. Finally, resist the urge to relate everything back to yourself. When she shares a struggle, don't immediately jump to, "Yeah, I went through something similar." Just let her experience be hers. Acknowledge it. Ask more about it. There will be time to share your experiences later, but in that moment, make it about understanding her. That restraint shows maturity. It shows you're not competing for attention. You're creating space for real exchange. And women notice this. They feel the difference between a man who listens to respond and a man who listens to understand. The first feels like effort. The second feels like relief. Buss studied attraction across cultures for years. He found one universal pattern. Women are attracted to men who make them feel safe, not just physically, emotionally, safe to be themselves, safe to express without judgment, safe to be imperfect. That safety comes from presence, from attention, from the feeling that you're not constantly evaluating whether they're good enough. You've already decided they're worth your time. Now you're just getting to know who they are. That shift in energy changes everything. She stops trying to impress you. She stops performing. She stops testing. She relaxes into being real. And that's when real intimacy becomes possible. Not the shallow kind based on attraction to an image. The deep kind based on actually knowing each other. That's the level most people never reach. Because they're too busy talking to listen. Too busy performing to be present. Too busy trying to be impressive to notice the person in front of them. But when you slow down enough to truly see someone, you create connection that most people spend their whole lives searching for. And that connection is what the monster represents. Not dominance, not control, not psychological games, just the rare ability to be fully present with another person. To see them, hear them, understand them, without needing anything in return. That presence is power, and power like that doesn't need to announce itself. People feel it, and they don't forget it. Let's bring this home. Everything we've talked about leads to one truth. The monster women desire isn't a person, it's a presence. It's the energy of someone who's mastered themselves so completely that being around them feels like gravity. Not heavy, just inevitable. You don't choose to be pulled toward gravity. You just are. That's what happens when a man builds himself correctly. He becomes a force that doesn't need to chase because everything naturally moves in his direction. But here's what most men get wrong about this. They think it's about becoming perfect, about never showing weakness, about always being in control. That's not it. The monster isn't perfect. He's integrated. He knows his darkness, and he's made peace with it. He knows his weakness, and he's stopped hiding from it. He's not pretending to be something he's not. He's just fully accepting what he is. And that acceptance creates confidence that can't be shaken. Because it's not based on external validation, it's based on internal truth. Jung called this individuation, the process of becoming whole by accepting every part of yourself. The light and the shadow, the strength and the fear, the power and the vulnerability. When you stop fighting against parts of yourself, you stop leaking energy. All that energy you used to spend on pretending or hiding or performing gets redirected into presence. And presence is what people feel when they're near you. They don't know why you feel different. They just know you do. That's the monster. Not a role you play, a state you inhabit. Now here's the final piece most people miss. This isn't about women. It never was. Women are just the mirror that shows you where you're still broken, where you're still needy, still reactive, still performing. Every test she gives is actually a gift. It shows you exactly where you need to grow, and if you use those tests correctly, you become stronger. Not to win her approval, but to build yourself into someone you actually respect. That's the real goal. Because when you respect yourself, you stop needing others to validate you. When you trust yourself, you stop looking for certainty from external sources. When you know your value, you stop defending it every time someone questions it. And that inner stability is what creates the outer magnetism people call charisma. Charisma isn't a skill. It's a side effect of self-mastery. When you've done the work to understand yourself, to regulate your emotions, to build a life you're proud of, your energy changes. You move differently. You speak differently. You exist differently. And people feel that difference without you saying a word. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts." But it's deeper than that. The quality of your life depends on the quality of your relationship with yourself. If you're constantly at war with who you are, that war shows up in everything you do, in how you relate to others, in how you handle stress, in how you move through the world. But if you've made peace with yourself, that peace radiates outward. And peace is magnetic. Not because it's loud or flashy, but because it's rare. Most people are walking chaos, controlled by their emotions, driven by their fears. Desperate for validation they think will finally make them feel okay. But the person who's found peace within themselves doesn't need external circumstances to feel okay. They already are. And that self-sufficiency is the most attractive quality that exists. Not because it's cold or distant, but because it's free. Free from neediness. Free from manipulation. Free from the constant anxiety of needing to prove something. That freedom is what women sense when they meet the rare man who's done the work. They feel it like fresh air after being in a crowded room. Finally, someone who doesn't need them to be anything other than themselves. Finally, someone who isn't trying to extract value or prove worth. Finally, someone who's just solidly, completely themselves. That's the monster, not a predator, not a manipulator, not a player of games. Just a man who's become so whole that his presence alone communicates everything he used to try to say with words. Strength without arrogance, confidence without ego, power without cruelty. That's the balance, and when you find it, you stop worrying about attraction, because attraction becomes automatic. Not because you're doing anything to create it, but because you've become the kind of person it naturally flows toward. Think about that. The entire journey isn't about learning techniques. It's about becoming someone who doesn't need them. Someone who's so grounded in themselves that games feel pointless. Manipulation feels beneath you. Pretending feels exhausting. You just show up, as you are, and that's enough. Not because you're perfect, but because you're real. And real always beats perfect. Because perfect is a performance. Real is a presence. And presence is what people remember long after the performance ends. So here's what you do next. Stop focusing on women. Start focusing on yourself. Build something you're proud of. Create something that matters. Develop skills that challenge you. Spend time alone and get comfortable with your own thoughts. Face the parts of yourself you've been avoiding, the insecurities, the fears, the weaknesses. Don't run from them. Integrate them. Because the man who knows his darkness controls it. The man who denies it gets controlled by it. That's the difference between power and pretending. And when you've done this work, when you've built yourself into someone you actually respect, everything else falls into place. Not because you've learned the right tactics, but because you've become the right person. The kind of person people want to be around. The kind of person women feel safe with. The kind of person who doesn't need to prove anything because their presence already says everything. That's the monster, and he's not out there. He's inside you, waiting for you to stop performing and start becoming. The world doesn't need more men pretending to be strong. It needs men who've done the work to actually become strong. Not loud strength, quiet strength. The kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind that just exists. Solid, steady, unshakable. That's what she's been looking for the entire time. Not someone to complete her. Someone who's already complete. And when two complete people come together, that's when real connection becomes possible. Not need, not dependency, not performance. Just two whole people choosing to share space. That's the goal. That's the work. That's the monster. Now go build him.